You ever meet someone who seems so confident, so sure they deserve the best, that it makes you stop and wonder what's really going on underneath? That's exactly how this story begins. At first, it looks like just another search for love. Someone trying to find the perfect partner, someone who believes they're ready for marriage. But the way she goes about it? That's where things take a sharp turn. Her name is Sanaa, and if you asked her, she'd tell you she's not like other women. In fact, she made it a point to say that, loudly, often, and without hesitation. Whether it was at family gatherings, social events, or even casual conversations, Sanaa had a habit of putting other women down. She would comment on their looks, question their character, and sometimes even laugh at their ambitions. But here's the strange part, she wasn't doing it just to feel superior. She had a goal in mind. Sanaa believed that by highlighting the flaws of other women, she would make herself stand out as the better choice for marriage. In her mind, it was simple. If men saw how problematic other women were, they'd naturally choose her instead. She thought she was being smart, strategic even. And for a while it seemed like she was getting attention, plenty of it. People noticed her. Men listened when she spoke. Some even seemed impressed by her confidence. But confidence and criticism can be a dangerous mix. At first her friends tried to brush it off. That's just how Sanaa is, they'd say, half laughing, half awkward. But over time it became harder to ignore. At weddings she'd whisper comments about the bride. At dinners she'd casually point out why someone else wasn't marriage material. And online? It was even worse. Subtle posts, indirect comparisons, little remarks that made it clear she saw herself as above everyone else. Still, Sanaa didn't see a problem. In fact, she believed she was being honest, refreshingly honest as she liked to call it. "At least I'm not fake," she once said. "I just say what everyone else is thinking." But were they really thinking that? As time went on, something unexpected started to happen. The same men who initially seemed interested began to pull away. Conversations that once felt easy started to feel uncomfortable. Invitations became less frequent. Messages slowed down. And yet, Sanaa couldn't understand why. From her perspective, she was doing everything right. She was presenting herself as confident, direct, and better than the rest. So why wasn't it working? One evening, at a small gathering hosted by a mutual friend, things reached a turning point. Sanaa, as usual, found herself in the center of attention. A group of men were there, some single, some just observing, and the topic of relationships came up. It didn't take long for Sanaa to steer the conversation in her usual direction. She started pointing out what she believed were the common flaws in women today. She talked about how some were too focused on careers, others too dependent, some too emotional, and others not serious enough about marriage. She spoke with confidence, almost like she was giving a lecture. At first the room was quiet. People listened. Some exchanged glances. And then something shifted. One of the men, someone who had been silent the whole time, finally spoke up. His response wasn't loud or aggressive, but it carried weight. Caught Sanaa off guard. Completely. And he wasn't the only one. What followed wasn't what Sanaa expected at all. The reaction from the men in that room didn't match her plan. It didn't validate her strategy. Instead, it revealed something she had completely overlooked. Something that would change the way she saw everything. The atmosphere in the room grew tense. Conversations paused. Even the people who had been casually scrolling on their phones started paying attention. Because this wasn't just a disagreement anymore, it was something deeper. Sanaa, for the first time, didn't have an immediate response. And that's where things get interesting. Because sometimes, when you spend so much time trying to prove you're better than everyone else, you don't realize what you might be revealing about yourself. And sometimes, the reaction you expect is the exact opposite of what you get. What exactly did those men say? And how did Sanaa respond when her entire approach was challenged right in front of her? That moment changed everything, but not in the way she thought it would. For a few seconds no one said anything. Sanaa sat there, her expression frozen between confidence and confusion, like she was waiting for the room to catch up with her. But instead of agreement, she started noticing something else. People avoiding eye contact, a few uneasy smiles, and that same man who had just spoken, calmly watching her reaction. He didn't raise his voice, didn't interrupt her rudely. He simply said, "It's interesting that you talk so much about what's wrong with other women, but not once about what you bring to a relationship." The words landed heavier than anyone expected. Sanaa blinked, almost like she didn't hear him correctly. "What do you mean?" she asked, her tone still holding on to that edge of confidence. Before he could answer, another man sitting across the room leaned forward slightly. "I think what he's saying is, it's easy to point out flaws. But when someone keeps doing it, it starts to feel like negativity, not honesty. That word, negativity, seemed to hang in the air. Sanaa gave a small laugh, the kind people use when they're trying to brush something off. So now being honest is a problem, she said. I'm just being real. If someone isn't suitable for marriage, why pretend otherwise? But this time no one rushed to agree with her. The same man spoke again, still calm. There's a difference between being honest and constantly putting others down. One shows clarity. The other can come across as insecurity. That was the moment something shifted in Sanaa's expression. Just slightly, but enough for anyone paying attention to notice. It wasn't anger, not yet. It was more like disbelief. As if she couldn't process that the conversation wasn't going her way. For so long she had been used to people either agreeing with her or staying quiet. This was new. She straightened her posture, crossing her arms. So you're saying I'm insecure? She asked, her voice tightening just a bit. No, he replied, shaking his head. I'm saying that when someone tries too hard to prove they're better than others, it can give that impression. Whether that's true or not, people notice it. A quiet murmur moved through the room. Not loud, but enough to show that others were listening closely now. Sanaa looked around, almost searching for someone to back her up. Her eyes briefly met a friend's, but the friend quickly looked away, pretending to be busy with her phone. That small moment didn't go unnoticed. And for the first time that evening, Sanaa didn't have a quick comeback ready. The conversation slowly shifted after that. Someone changed the topic, another person made a light joke, and the tension eased just enough for people to start talking again. But the energy had changed. It wasn't the same as before. Sanaa stayed quiet for a while, which was unusual for her. She nodded occasionally, gave short responses, but didn't jump back into the spotlight like she normally would. It was as if something in her mind was replaying that moment over and over again. Later that night, as people began to leave, a few polite goodbyes were exchanged. Sanaa forced a smile, keeping her composure intact. On the outside nothing seemed wrong. But inside, something was unsettled. On her way home, her phone buzzed with a message. It was from one of the guys who had been at the gathering. Someone who had previously shown interest in getting to know her better. Hey, I hope you got home safe, the message read. Simple, normal. Sanaa stared at the screen for a moment before replying. Yeah, I did. Thanks. There was a pause. Then another message came through. I wanted to say something, if that's okay. Sanaa hesitated. Part of her already knew where this might be going, but she replied anyway. Sure. A few seconds later, the message appeared. I think you're confident, and that's a good thing. But sometimes, the way you talk about other people, it feels uncomfortable. It's like you're trying to compete with everyone instead of just being yourself. Sanaa's grip on her phone tightened slightly. She read the message again. And again. This wasn't the reaction she had imagined. Not even close. For the longest time, she believed her approach made her stand out in a good way. That it showed she had standards, that she knew what she wanted in a partner. But now, hearing the same kind of feedback from more than one person, it didn't feel like a coincidence anymore. Still, she wasn't ready to accept it. Instead, her mind started pushing back. Maybe they misunderstood her. Maybe they were just uncomfortable with someone who spoke the truth. Maybe they preferred people who pretended everything was perfect. By the time she got home, she had already started building her own explanation. The next morning, Sanaa woke up with a familiar sense of determination. Whatever happened the night before, she wasn't going to let it shake her. If anything, she felt more convinced that she needed to stay true to herself. But as the day went on, little reminders started to appear. A group chat that used to be active suddenly felt quiet when she joined. A plan she thought she was included in turned out to be already finalized, without her. Even on social media, interactions felt different, subtle but noticeable. It wasn't dramatic. No one confronted her directly. No one said anything harsh. But the shift was there, quietly growing. And Sanaa could feel it. For the first time she started to wonder, was it really everyone else? Or was there something she hadn't been seeing all along? But even as that question formed in her mind, another thought quickly followed, louder and more familiar. No, she told herself. They're just not used to someone like me. Still, deep down, something didn't sit right. Because if her approach was working, why did it suddenly feel like everything was slipping out of place? And more importantly, was this just the beginning of something much bigger than she expected? The days after that gathering didn't feel the same for Sanaa, even if nothing around her changed in a loud or obvious way. Life still moved forward, people still went to work, still met for tea, still posted pictures and laughed in conversations. But for her, there was a strange silence in places where there used to be ease. At first she tried to ignore it. Sanaa told herself it was all in her head. People were just busy. That's what she believed. But then small moments started stacking up in ways she couldn't easily dismiss. Her closest friend, Aisha, was usually the first person to call her in the morning. They would talk about everything, family plans, even random gossip. But now the calls were shorter and sometimes they didn't come at all. When Sanaa finally reached out, Aisha answered with a calm tone that felt different. "You've been quiet lately," Sanaa said one afternoon, trying to sound casual. Aisha hesitated before replying. "I've just been thinking a lot." "About what?" Sanaa asked quickly. There was a pause on the line. "About how we talk about people sometimes, and what it says about us." Sanaa frowned slightly. "Are you talking about that night again?" "I don't know," Aisha said softly. "It just made me uncomfortable. Not just what you said, but how often it comes up. It feels like every time we talk, someone else is being judged." Sanaa didn't respond right away. She looked around her room, suddenly aware of the silence on the other end of the call. "That's not what I'm doing," she finally said. "I'm just being honest." "I know you think that," Aisha replied, her voice still gentle. "But it doesn't always land that way." That word again. Land. It stuck in Sanaa's mind after the call ended. Outside her personal circle, things were shifting in a more visible way. At a family event a few days later, Sanaa noticed something unusual. Conversations that used to include her now seemed to form slightly away from her. Not completely excluding her, but not pulling her in the same way either. Even when she spoke, there was a brief moment before responses came. A delay she had never noticed before. Her cousin, who used to tease her about marriage plans, now spoke more carefully around her. Almost like he was choosing words twice before saying them. "You've always been very clear about what you want," he said at one point, smiling politely. Sanaa nodded. "Of course. There's no point in wasting time with the wrong people." He didn't argue. But he also didn't agree the way he used to. Later that evening, Sanaa overheard a conversation she wasn't meant to hear. Two relatives talking quietly near the kitchen. "She's confident, yes," one of them said. "But sometimes confidence starts sounding like judgment." The other voice replied, "It's not even about confidence anymore. It's how she speaks about other women. It makes people uncomfortable." Sanaa froze for a moment behind the wall. She stepped away before they could notice her, but the words followed her anyway. Uncomfortable. That word was starting to appear everywhere. At the same time, something strange was happening online. A group chat she used to be active in was quieter. Not empty, but less responsive. Messages she sent were seen, sometimes liked, but rarely turned into conversations like before. One evening, she noticed a new post in a different group, a general discussion about relationships and expectations. She didn't name anyone, but the timing made her stomach tighten. "Confidence is attractive," the post read, "but constant comparison and putting others down can push people away without you realizing it." There were reactions under it. Agreeing ones. Thoughtful ones. No one mentioned her name. But she still felt like it was aimed in her direction. Sanaa locked her phone and placed it face down on the table. For the first time, she didn't feel angry right away. Instead, she felt something else she couldn't fully name. Confusion mixed with irritation. And underneath that, a small, uncomfortable doubt she didn't want to sit with for too long. Meanwhile, the men from that gathering were also reacting in their own quiet ways. One of them, the same man who had spoken directly to her that night, had mentioned her name briefly in a separate conversation. Not in a harsh way. Not mocking. Just reflective. "She has a strong personality," he said. "But sometimes strong personalities don't leave room for anyone else." Another man replied, "Or maybe she just hasn't realized how she comes across yet." There was no laughter. No gossip. Just observation. And somehow that made it heavier. Days passed like this. Small changes, subtle shifts, conversations that felt slightly out of place. Sanaa began noticing patterns she hadn't paid attention to before. People listened but less eagerly. Responded but more carefully. Engaged but without the same openness. Yet no one confronted her directly. No one gave her a clear answer she could argue with or dismiss. And that was what made it harder. Because when there is no clear argument, there is only interpretation. One evening, Sanaa stood in front of the mirror longer than usual. She wasn't preparing to go anywhere. She was just looking at herself. At the version of her that she had always believed was confident, straightforward, and unbothered by opinions. But now, even she wasn't sure how others were seeing that same version. Her phone lit up again. A message preview appeared on the screen, this time from a number she didn't immediately recognize. She hesitated before picking it up. The message was short. We need to talk about what happened. Not everyone agrees with how things are being interpreted. Sana stared at the screen. Her thumb hovered over the reply button. And for the first time, she wasn't sure what direction this conversation was going to take next, or what truth was waiting on the other side of it. Sana kept staring at that message for a long time. The room around her felt unusually quiet, like even the usual sounds of the house had faded into the background. Her thumb hovered over the reply button, but she didn't press it right away. Something about the tone of the message felt serious, different from casual conversations she was used to. We need to talk about what happened. There was no anger in it, no friendliness either. Just a calm insistence that made her chest tighten slightly. Finally she replied. Talk about what exactly? The response didn't come immediately. Those few minutes of silence felt longer than they should have. Sana paced slowly in her room, trying to convince herself she was overthinking. People talked all the time. Maybe this was just another misunderstanding she could clear up easily. But deep down she already knew it wasn't going to be that simple. When the reply finally came, it was even more direct. About how things were said at the gathering, and how it affected people afterward. Sana read it twice, then a third time. Her fingers tightened around the phone. I didn't say anything wrong, she typed back. People are just sensitive. There was another pause. Then came a longer message. It's not just about that night. It's been building for a while. The way conversations are handled, the way other women are talked about, people notice these things. Even if no one says it immediately. Sana stopped walking. She sat down slowly on the edge of her bed. For a moment she considered not replying at all. But something pushed her to continue. So what is this really about? She typed. Because it feels like suddenly everyone has a problem with me. This time the reply came faster. It's not sudden. It just wasn't spoken about openly before. That line stayed with her longer than she expected. Wasn't spoken about before. She leaned back against the wall trying to process it. If people had felt this way earlier, why didn't anyone tell her directly? Why wait until now? Her thoughts were interrupted by another notification. This time it was a voice note. She hesitated before pressing play. A calm male voice spoke on the other end. Look, no one is trying to attack you. That's not the point. But there's something you might not be seeing from the outside. When someone constantly compares, judges, or criticizes others to make a point, it creates distance. Not respect. Distance. Sana listened without blinking. The voice continued. You think you're being honest? But honesty without balance can feel harsh. And over time people start stepping back. Not because they hate you, but because they don't know how to talk around it anymore. When the voice note ended, the silence in her room felt heavier than before. Sana placed the phone down slowly. For the first time she didn't respond immediately. Instead she sat still, replaying moments in her mind. The gathering. The conversations. The small changes in people's behavior. The quiet pauses. The indirect comments. The way her friend Aisha had spoken. And slowly something uncomfortable began forming, not clarity, not yet, but awareness. But awareness alone wasn't enough to settle anything. Because later that evening she received another message that changed the tone completely. We're planning to meet tomorrow. A few people want to clear things properly. It's better if everything is said directly instead of behind messages. Sana read it twice. A meeting. Her stomach tightened slightly. This wasn't just a casual conversation anymore. This felt like something bigger, something gathering momentum without her control. She looked at her reflection in the dark screen of her phone. For a moment she didn't recognize the expression on her own face. Not anger exactly. Not fear either. Something in between. The next day came faster than she expected. By afternoon she found herself getting ready without fully thinking through it. Her movements were slow, distracted. Every step felt like she was walking towards something she couldn't fully see. When she reached the location, a small cafe she had been to before, she paused outside for a moment. Through the glass window she could already see familiar faces inside. Not a crowd. Just a few people. But enough to make her hesitate. Aisha was there. So was the man who had spoken at the gathering. And a couple of others she recognized from different events. They were talking quietly when she arrived. The moment she stepped inside, the conversation slowed. Sana forced a calm expression and walked over. For a few seconds no one spoke. Then Aisha stood up slightly, gesturing for her to sit. And just like that, Sana realized this wasn't going to be a normal conversation. The air felt different. Heavier. Like something important had already been decided before she even arrived. The man who had spoken at the gathering leaned forward slightly, his tone calm but serious. "We didn't bring you here to argue," he said. "We brought you here because things have reached a point where silence is making it worse." Sanaa looked at each of them one by one. "What exactly is being made worse?" she asked, her voice steady but tense. Aisha looked down for a moment before speaking. "Misunderstandings. Distance. People feeling judged even when you don't mean it that way." Sanaa's jaw tightened slightly. "I never asked anyone to feel that way," she said. "No," the man replied. "But impact doesn't always depend on intention." That sentence hung in the air. For a moment no one spoke again. Outside the world kept moving. Cars passed, people walked, life continued normally. But inside that small cafe, something was building toward a moment that no one seemed ready to name yet. Sanaa looked at their faces again. And for the first time she wasn't sure whether this conversation was meant to clear things, or change everything she believed about herself. Sanaa felt the weight of every pair of eyes on her, but what unsettled her more was how calm everyone seemed. No one looked angry. No one was raising their voice. And somehow that made it harder to push back. If they had been loud or rude, she could have dismissed it. But this quiet, controlled tone made everything feel more real. She took a slow breath. "So what is this exactly?" she asked. "An intervention?" No one smiled at that. "It's a conversation that should have happened earlier," the man replied. "But there's something else you need to know too." Sanaa's brows pulled together slightly. "What do you mean, something else?" Aisha glanced at the others before speaking. "After that night, people didn't just talk here. It spread a bit further." That caught Sanaa off guard. "Spread where?" Another girl sitting at the table, someone Sanaa recognized but wasn't very close to, spoke carefully. "Different groups. Mutual circles. Even people who weren't there heard about it." Sanaa's chest tightened. "So people are discussing me now?" "It's not gossip in the way you're thinking," the girl added quickly. "It's more like people sharing how they felt for a while." "For a while?" Sanaa repeated, her voice slightly sharper now. Again that phrase. "Not new. Not sudden." The man leaned back slightly. "You have to understand something. This didn't start at that gathering. That was just the first time someone said something out loud in front of you." Sanaa felt her heartbeat pick up. "And now?" she asked. Aisha hesitated before answering. "Now people are more open about it. Even the men you've interacted with, they've been talking too." That was the moment everything shifted. Sanaa straightened in her seat. "Talking about what exactly?" There was a brief silence, like no one wanted to be the one to say it directly. Finally the man spoke. "About whether they see you as someone they'd want to marry." The words hit harder than anything else that had been said so far. Sanaa let out a small, disbelieving laugh. "And let me guess, they've all suddenly decided I'm not?" "It's not that simple," he replied. "But yes, perspectives have changed." That stung more than she expected. For so long, Sanaa believed she was standing out in a positive way. That her confidence, her honesty, her standards, made her more appealing. But hearing that those same qualities were now being questioned, it didn't match the image she had built in her mind. "Why?" she asked more quietly this time. "Because I speak the truth?" "No," Aisha said gently. "Because it feels like you're always comparing. Always pointing out what others lack instead of showing who you are." Sanaa looked away for a moment, her thoughts racing. But before she could respond, the second twist came, one she didn't see coming at all. "There's something else," the man added. Sanaa looked back at him, her patience thinning. "What now?" He exchanged a glance with Aisha before continuing. "Some of the men felt like, the way you talk about other women now, it makes them wonder how you might talk about them later." The table went completely silent. Sanaa blinked. "What?" she said almost under her breath. "If someone can be judged that easily," he explained, "it creates doubt. People start thinking, what happens when they're not around? What happens after marriage, during disagreements, during tough times?" Sanaa's expression shifted, this time more visibly. "That's not fair," she said quickly. "I'm not like that." "But that's the perception," he replied calmly. "And perception matters in relationships." The words felt heavier than before. This wasn't just about being too honest anymore. This was about trust. About how people saw her long-term, not just in conversations. And that realization hit differently. Sanaa opened her mouth to respond, but nothing came out immediately. Because deep down, she knew this wasn't something she could argue away easily. For the first time, it wasn't about defending a single comment or a single moment. It was about a pattern. A pattern others had been noticing, discussing, and now, acting on. She felt the ground shift beneath everything she had believed was working in her favor. So what are you saying? She finally asked. That all of this has already changed things? Aisha nodded slowly. It already has. Sanaa's fingers tightened slightly around the edge of the table. And you're only telling me now? She asked. We're telling you because it's reached a point where it can't be ignored anymore, Aisha replied. That answer didn't bring comfort. If anything, it made things feel more serious. Because this wasn't about preventing something from happening. It had already started. The distance, the conversations, the change in how people saw her. And now she was sitting in the middle of it, hearing it all at once. But even then, part of her resisted. So what do you expect me to do? She asked, her voice steady again, but with a sharper edge underneath. Change who I am just because people are uncomfortable? No one is asking you to change who you are, the man said. But maybe, understand how you come across. Sanaa held his gaze. And if I don't agree with that? She asked. This time, no one answered immediately. Because the truth was already hanging in the air. If she didn't agree, then nothing would change. And if nothing changed, neither would the way people were starting to see her. The silence stretched longer than before. And in that moment, Sanaa realized something she hadn't considered until now. This wasn't just about one conversation, one gathering, or one misunderstanding. This was about a turning point. One that could either shift everything moving forward, or quietly close doors she didn't even realize were already slipping out of reach. The silence at the table stretched longer than anyone expected. Sanaa could feel it pressing in on her, forcing her to sit with everything that had just been said. For once, there was no quick response, no clever comeback waiting at the edge of her tongue. Just a heavy mix of thoughts she couldn't organize fast enough. She looked at Aisha, then at the others. No one looked angry. That almost made it worse. If they were angry, she could have defended herself. But this calm honesty left no space to hide. So basically, Sanaa said slowly, people have already made up their minds about me. The man shook his head. Not everyone. But enough people have started to step back. Sanaa let out a quiet breath, staring down at the table. For the first time, she wasn't trying to win the conversation. She was trying to understand it. And all this time, she said almost to herself, I thought I was doing the right thing. Aisha leaned forward slightly. Maybe you thought being direct would help you stand out. But it ended up creating distance instead. That word again. Distance. Sanaa nodded faintly, like something was finally connecting. All those small moments, the quiet group chats, the shorter conversations, the subtle changes, suddenly made sense in a way they hadn't before. I didn't see it like that, she admitted. No one interrupted her. I thought, if I showed I had standards, people would respect that. I thought pointing out problems meant I understood relationships better. Her voice wasn't defensive anymore. It was quieter, more honest than anyone had heard from her before. But maybe I focused so much on what others were doing wrong, she paused, then added, that I never showed what I could do right. The table remained still, but the energy shifted. Not completely, not fully relaxed, but softer. That's all anyone was trying to say, the man replied. Sanaa nodded again, this time more firmly. It wasn't easy to admit, and it didn't fix everything instantly, but it was the first real moment where she wasn't pushing back. I get it, she said. At least, I think I do. Aisha gave her a small, relieved smile. For a moment it felt like things might settle there. Like the tension that had been building for days was finally starting to release. Not perfectly, not completely, but enough to move forward. But just as that feeling began to settle, Sanaa spoke again. There's one thing I still don't understand. The others looked at her. If this has been going on for so long, she said, why didn't anyone tell me earlier? Why wait until things reached this point? That question changed the mood again. Aisha's smile faded slightly. The man leaned back, exhaling quietly. Because, Aisha said slowly, people weren't sure how you'd react. Sanaa frowned. What does that mean? It means, the other girl at the table added, every time someone tried to hint at it before, it felt like the conversation would shut down. Or turn into an argument. Sanaa's expression tightened just a little. And over time, the man continued, people stopped trying. It just felt easier to step back quietly. That realization hit deeper than anything else. Because this time it wasn't about what she said. It was about what people felt they couldn't say. Sanaa looked down again, her thoughts heavier now. For all the confidence she carried, she had never considered that people might have been holding back around her this whole time. And that realization stayed with her. After a while, the conversation slowly softened again. It didn't turn cheerful, but it became more open. People shared small examples, moments that had felt uncomfortable, situations where things could have gone differently. Sanaa listened. Really listened this time. She didn't interrupt. Didn't defend. Just absorbed it. By the time they left the cafe, the tension had shifted into something quieter. Not gone, but no longer sharp. As they stood outside, Aisha turned to her. "This doesn't mean everything is fixed overnight," she said gently. "But it's a start." Sanaa nodded. "I know." And for the first time in days she felt something close to clarity. Not comfort. Not confidence. But awareness. That night, back in her room, Sanaa sat alone again. But this time the silence felt different. Less confusing, more reflective. She picked up her phone, scrolling through old messages, old conversations. Things she had said casually before now looked different through a new lens. Small comments. Quick judgments. Things she never thought twice about. She placed the phone down slowly. Maybe this was the reset she didn't know she needed. Maybe everything that had happened, the reactions, the distance, the confrontation, was leading her to something better. But just as that thought settled, her phone buzzed again. Another message. Different number. She hesitated before opening it. "I heard about what happened today," the message read. Sanaa's brows pulled together slightly. Before she could reply, another message came through. "Honestly, it doesn't change much for me." Her chest tightened again. "What do you mean?" she typed quickly. The reply came almost instantly. "Some things once noticed can't be unseen, even if you try to fix them." Sanaa stared at the screen. The earlier conversation, the effort to understand, the moment of acceptance, it suddenly felt incomplete. Because while she had faced the conflict, she hadn't fully escaped its consequences. And that's when it truly hit her. This wasn't just about realizing something. It was about whether that realization had come too late. Sanaa kept staring at that last message long after the screen went dim. She didn't reply right away this time. Not because she didn't have something to say, but because she finally understood that not every response needed to be immediate. Some things needed time, even silence. She placed her phone beside her and leaned back, letting out a slow breath. The day had been heavier than anything she had experienced in a long time. Not because people had attacked her, but because they hadn't. They had spoken calmly, clearly, and honestly. And somehow that made everything sink in deeper. For the first time, Sanaa wasn't focused on proving herself right. She was thinking about how she had been seen by others, and how different that was from how she saw herself. The next few days were quiet. Not in a dramatic way, but in a steady, thoughtful way. Sanaa didn't jump into group chats like before. She didn't rush to comment on things or share opinions just to be heard. Instead, she observed more. Listened more. At first it felt strange. Almost like she was stepping back from her own personality. But slowly she realized she wasn't losing herself. She was just seeing parts of herself more clearly. One afternoon she met Aisha again, just the two of them this time. There was no tension like before, but there was still a sense of carefulness between them. They sat quietly for a few moments before Sanaa spoke. "I've been thinking a lot," she said. Aisha nodded. "I figured you would." Sanaa gave a small, honest smile. "I didn't realize how often I was doing it. The comparisons, the comments. It felt normal to me." Aisha looked at her gently. "Sometimes we don't notice our patterns until someone holds a mirror up." Sanaa nodded. "Yeah, and I guess I didn't like what I saw at first." There was no judgment in Aisha's expression, just understanding. "But I'm trying," Sanaa added. "Not to pretend, not to act different, just to be more aware." "That's all anyone can really do," Aisha said. That conversation felt lighter than the one at the cafe, but it also felt more real. There were no big speeches, no pressure. Just two people trying to rebuild something that had shifted. Meanwhile, things in Sanaa's social circle didn't magically go back to how they were before. Some people warmed up again slowly. Conversations started to feel easier in certain groups. But with others, the distance remained. And this time, Sanaa didn't ignore it. She understood now that trust and comfort didn't return instantly just because someone had a realization. It took time. It took consistency. A few days later, she ran into the same man who had first spoken up at the gathering. The conversation was brief, but it carried a different tone than before. "You seem quieter these days," he said. Sanaa smiled slightly. "Maybe I'm just listening more." He nodded like he understood exactly what she meant. "That's not a bad thing," he replied. There was no tension between them anymore, but there wasn't instant closeness either. Just a neutral space waiting to see what would come next. That night, Sanaa picked up her phone again and opened the message from the unknown number. the one that had said some things couldn't be unseen. She read it again, but this time it didn't hit the same way. Instead of reacting emotionally, she typed a simple reply. I understand. And maybe you're right. But I'm still going to work on being better, whether people notice or not. She paused for a moment, then pressed send. There was no immediate reply. But this time she didn't wait for one. Because something had shifted inside her. Not completely, not perfectly, but enough to change how she approached things. Weeks passed and slowly her environment adjusted. Not all at once, not dramatically, but in small, noticeable ways. Conversations became more balanced. People seemed more relaxed around her in certain settings. And most importantly, she felt different in how she carried herself. She still had opinions. She still had standards. But she no longer felt the need to prove them by putting others down. And that made a difference. One evening, at another small gathering, the topic of relationships came up again. For a brief moment, Sana felt that old instinct, to jump in, to analyze, to compare. But she stopped herself. Instead, she said something simple. I think everyone is just figuring things out in their own way. The room didn't go silent this time. It continued naturally. And that's when she realized, being heard didn't always mean being the loudest voice in the room. Sometimes, it meant being the most understood. As the night went on, Sana sat back listening to others share their thoughts. There was no pressure, no need to stand out. And for the first time in a long time she felt at ease. Not because everyone suddenly saw her as perfect, but because she no longer needed them to. By the time she got home, her phone had a few new messages. Some casual, some friendly. Nothing overwhelming, nothing forced. Just normal. And that felt like progress. Sana placed her phone down and looked around her room, the same space where everything had started to shift. She smiled slightly, not because everything was fixed, but because she understood something she hadn't before. Confidence wasn't about proving you were better than others. It was about knowing your worth without needing comparisons. And as simple as that sounded, it had taken her everything to finally see it.